You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
With me today is Faris Aranki, who has some very nice information to share with us today. Faris, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, Chris, especially as we're dressed alike.
Yes, this is fantastic. I see you got the memo on, hey, you got to wear the light green shirt.
I did. Things always go smoother when people are dressed alike.
They really do. That's fantastic. So Faris, tell me more about your work history and what you're doing today.
Okay, let's start with the here and now. So I'm the CEO and founder of a consulting firm called Shiageto Consulting, where we specialize in bringing emotional intelligence to strategy, right? So a lot of companies out there do a lot of great things in strategy, coming up with big ideas, solving complex problems. And heck, I used to do that for a living. But you know what? Nobody does anything with those great ideas and those great strategies. Then all they're doing is writing big documents, heavy paperweights. Now, I did that a lot in my career. So what we do today at Shiageto Consulting is bridge that divide, get people to buy into great strategies, get teams aligned, get them working better together by unleashing that emotional intelligence and that better focus amongst the team. So I've been doing that for 4 years. Absolutely love it. Work with companies ranging from super big ones like Amazon to super small ones. I could name some companies you probably would never have heard of them, but it's about getting those teams buzzing and all pointing in the same direction. So that's what I do today. How did I get here? Well, I used to be that strategy consultant who was paid big bucks to solve complex problems. I did that for 12 years. Before that, I was in the energy industry. So I know all about oil and gas, if anyone wants to talk to me about that. And a long time before that, I used to be a high school teacher. So I can also talk to you about high school maths and economics, which is what I used to teach around the world. So, and that's a little bit about me, but there's so much to dive into there. Hopefully, Chris, I've set you up. Let's go for it.
That sounds fantastic. I was looking through your past experience and what you've done, business owners and entrepreneurs, and anyone who might be just in the working world, they're trying to find their path to success. And it's elusive. What goes into creating that strategy for success? And you've broken it down into an equation, which I think is just fantastic, which will allow people to expand their minds a little bit on what it's going to take to be successful. Do you mind sharing what that strategy is, what the equation is?
Yeah, for sure. I love the equation and I own a trademark around it. Actually, I fought a trademark battle for it. So I've got to love this equation because it involves lawyers and everything. But that's another story that I've done. So the equation quite simply says, this maths teacher in me, I needed an equation. Look, if you want to be successful in life, first of all, you've got to have a goal. You've got to have an objective, right? Otherwise, you're just strutting around life like an atom, right? So if you are clear on what you want to achieve, then it's easy, right? You need 3 components. The first is IQ, right? And that's not the classic Mensa IQ, that's strategic IQ. Do you have good quality ideas? Have you tested them, right? Are they as sharp as possible, right? If you do, and you've got a great idea, then the second component you need is good strategic EQ. This is emotional intelligence, the ability to take others on the journey with you, because nobody can make a strategy come real just completely on their own. So you need to get others excited, invested, and bought into it. And then the third component is FQ, which many people might not have heard of, is focus quotient. It's not enough to have a great idea, people bought into it. If you're not focused enough to deliver it, then it's going to fall away on the wayside. So IQ, EQ, and FQ will get you to wherever you want to get to.
Wow, that's fantastic. And something you mentioned before was it takes that village, it takes that team. You have to get them to rally behind you in order to move that idea forward. And getting the buy-in from people can be a challenge, I'm sure, both with your years of experience with strategy consulting and what you do now as well. What does it take to get the team to buy into your idea? What's the best strategy behind that?
I mean, there's a whole plethora of stuff, but let's start with the obvious one. Where many of the companies that I worked for in my old hat as a strategy consultant is if you try and dump a strategy on somebody, they are more likely to resist than if they built it themselves. It's the simple factor, right? It's far easier to have somebody own something if they built it themselves. It's the IKEA effect, effectively, right? So, I built this, so I'm more invested in it. But, too many companies make that mistake of hiring somebody to do their thinking for them, or just only leaving it to the senior executives to do the thinking and then dropping it on everyone going, right, well, you've all got to love it now because we thought it up, right? So that's the number one thing to do. You get people involved. And it's not saying that you need to go around with a blank piece of paper to everybody in your company, right? That obviously that would be unwieldy unless you're in a 4-person business, then maybe you can do that. But but allow them to touch and feel it in the development stage, right? I often talk about the wonky iPads in the Apple Store. Now, have you heard about this before,
No,
Chris?
no, I haven't.
In the early days of Apple, in the Apple Store, they'd put every Apple device 10 degrees slightly wonky, slightly askew, right? Because when a human being walks in, what's the first thing they're going to do that their brain will want them to do?
I think they're going to scan their surroundings and see if anything's out of place or in place.
Yeah, exactly. We don't like things not straight. So most people reach out, touch it, and correct it. Now, what's shown is as soon as they touch the product, they're like twice as likely to buy it because they feel they own it. They've had it, they felt it. So I always talk about have a wonky strategy that's 10%, 10 degrees, just a bit straight. Go and show it to people. Say, what do you think? Let them change one thing about it. They suddenly feel like they own it, right? They suddenly feel more invested in it rather than if you dump the polished, finished article on them. So there's lots of ways to get that engagement, but that's probably the number one thing I say about how do you get people to buy into an idea. Okay. And then further down the line, there's lots of stuff around how you talk to them. Okay. Who's communicating with them? It's the old adage of it's not the message, it's the messenger. So sometimes you've got to pick the right person to tell them about that strategy or get them excited about the strategy. And that could be two ends of the scale. You could get someone super senior that they're in awe of, or you could get someone who they see day to day and have lots of trust with. It's about deciding for each group of individuals in the company and making that call. So it's a big part of it, how you go around sharing the strategy and investing the time. So, a lot of the senior teams I work with, they take 2 months, 3 months to develop the strategy and they go, right, we're done. No, my friend, there's another 6 months of work now. You're just about to start. So those are two key components for getting people bought into strategy.
Nice. I've seen this happen too many times where there are companies and, like you said, the board members, C-level executives who have this idea. They look to implement this and they don't take any feedback or advice from the people who are actually going to be executing it at the lower level. Whether that's new systems and CRMs or new processes, they're not on the ground doing that grunt work where they understand the processes and everything that's involved. And I feel like if they instead got people involved, like you said, once you get that buy-in, share that experience, let them bring the ideas to you. And then it's a community project. That way everyone has skin in the game and feels like it's their own.
Yeah, completely. And, I have the fortune of working with a whole vast array of companies and there are some really clever ways of doing that. And I absolutely love it every time I see it. So yeah, increase the ownership, increase the involvement. And actually they'll be surprised because they get such better ideas than rather thinking they know the answer to everything.
Yes, absolutely. Now, how would some C-level executives who have this idea go about presenting that in its infancy stages where they can still lead with their idea, but still get the input from other members so that way everyone has skin in the game and is now involved? Because that can be a challenge. They're trying to bring this top level idea down and trying to get that buy-in and strategies from them can be a challenge.
Yeah, and let's not sort of downplay how difficult that is, because first of all, there's a lot of ego involved, right? Your senior executive to say, actually, I need the help of people below me, when actually everything that is in your previous career up to that point has told you that you're great and actually you have achieved. So to actually have that humility sense of, hey, I need to open this up, but then actually making it happen in a delicate way without, because you also don't want the people below you to think you're incompetent and go, well, hang on a minute, why are we doing your work for you? Right. So it's that delicate balance. So there's a lot about there that involves EQ, right? Me getting comfortable as a senior exec to ask, but also what's the right way to ask? And actually, I don't advocate go around and ask everybody, but maybe when I talked about how you could invite one member from the shop floor to join the design sessions, right? And you could maybe make that a competition or make that something that people want to get involved in. Like, oh my God, I'm going to be the one person who's going to get, or you have representatives who collect the views and then feed them up. Or, I do something called wargaming and pre-mortems a lot with companies, which is let's take an idea you already have and stress test it, right?
Yeah.
Let's throw some stuff. Let's make it very interactive. Now, whenever I do a war game with a C-suite, board of team, I would say, we're going to have another team made up of other people in your company. And I normally say, go and find me some graduates, go and find me some shop floor guys. They're going to have a chance to try and beat the senior guys in this game. right? So they're going to enjoy it. But the real benefit for you, this is what I said to the C-suite, you're suddenly going to get a whole different way of thinking, which might improve your strategy because there are things you don't look at anymore that they will have guerrilla warfare almost. And the great thing is they're part of your company. So although they might win on the day, they're actually enhancing where you're going to get to. So it never fails. Okay. Once we're convinced that we do that, we go and get this team. This team brings in a level of innovation and a level of insight that they just wouldn't have otherwise. And it's a great way of feeding that into the strategy process.
Yes, absolutely. Have you ever worked with a company that it's extremely hard to get the top level executives on board with that idea, where they just want to silo that information and the strategy planning, where they don't want to involve other members of the company at all?
And for sure, right? And I've got
Mhm.
every kind of challenge. So I always say each group is unique, but that you see the same common patterns of resistance and biases. So how you break through that is part of the fun of my job, right? Everybody has drivers and it's finding them and leaning into them. So sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's competition. Sometimes you just have to ask someone higher up to tell them they need to, right? So everyone has a lever for good or for bad, as people at home sitting going, I don't have a lever. Nobody can influence me. But unfortunately, we all do. And some of us give away those tells a lot easier than others. But everyone has a way of coming and seeing the epiphany. And I can tell you lots of stories of different senior people I've had to work with in different ways. That's the way we go about it.
That's fantastic. What has been your most favorite project that you've worked on so far? Something that's extremely complex or something that was right under their nose? They just needed you to realize light bulb moment. Aha, there it is.
I could tell you loads of projects where being able to help somebody in a team or a team see that their dynamic isn't working well, that they've ostracized a team member who actually can deliver so much value. That happens time and time again, or that there's a dominant person who's actually not actually generating the best ideas in a team. But I think the thing pound for pound that really helps teams, well, actually, I was going to say two things. One is improving their listening, but the one I'm going to talk about is prioritization. Up and down the country, all around the world, people find it hard to prioritize. People find it hard to say, these are the only 3 or 5 things we're going to work on, because it means having to give up and say goodbye to other stuff. But you know what? It makes such a difference to their ability to do those 3 or 5 or 10 things really, really well. Right. So some of my best projects have been where I've helped, because everyone knows that logic. Everyone knows, hey, if we focus on one thing, but it's actually letting go of stuff is the hard part. So some of my favorite projects have been where I've worked with senior teams to let go of stuff. Now, how do I do that? Again, look at levers, look at things. A classic way that I do is turn it into a game. But you ever play Pokemon, right? And most people out there play Pokemon or card games, top trump games I used to play as a kid, which is like Pokemon. So I will often use with senior executives, I will turn their initiatives into Pokemon cards. Actually, I will go out, laminate them, create a deck of cards. We will play Pokemon in the boardroom because it's a way of changing the framing, the reference point. Because if it's a project on a piece of paper is, hey, I invented this project. This was a great idea I came up with 2 years ago. We're going to complete it. But maybe 2 years has passed. It's no longer a relevant project. Once you turn it into a Pokemon card that keeps losing against other Pokemon cards, they go, hang on, man, why is my card so shit, man? Why? And I'm like, I don't know. It's your project. And they're like, well, let's get rid of that one. All right. So it's just, I use this time and time again, or a variant of this in the boardroom, and it just watch senior executives let go of things that they haven't previously been able to let go. Makes such a difference.
Wow, that's such a brilliant strategy because I think just like you mentioned, it's able to take that idea that they had and maybe they were very resistant to other ideas or they just fell in love with their own idea and they needed that mental shift in order to gain a new perspective about that idea. And then suddenly within this gamification, they realize, okay, maybe this isn't a great strategy.
Exactly. And then it's less of an ego. You don't have to say, I'm backing down. It's, hey, the cards tell us these are the best 10 cards. This is going to be our deck from now on.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. So now when it comes down to that formula that you've created, the IQ, the EQ, and the FQ,
Yeah.
what could a business owner or an individual do to help improve each of those factors? First being the IQ. Is there anything that they can do to improve their ability to come up with the best solution?
So I think the IQ is, and the good news is these things are interlinked, right? Don't sit in silo. That's why we said they're multiplicators. not additive. Because a lot of companies go, well, we got loads of IQ, don't need to worry about the other two. No, you need to at least, going back to what we said about how do you get people to buy into strategies, is if you're a senior executive, get more inputs into your strategy. Right. You don't know what you don't know, but also your level of creativity, as clever as you are, as smart as you are, is never going to be as good as crowdsourcing ideas, right? Is never going to be so good. So open up. And that could mean to the whole company. Remember what we said about the challenge that you're not going to literally, but generally, it starts with your own team, right? I talked about teams that ostracize team members. It's very common for me to go into a senior leadership team and they say, well, we're having an strategy meeting or a brainstorming session. And then you look around and only 2 people are actually doing the talk. They're not leveraging the 8 in the team, the 10 in the team. So actually having a mechanism, even if suddenly that's an uplift of 800% if you get the other 8 people to contribute. So get more inputs is my general advice when it comes to increasing your IQ, because as great as an individual is, you're never going to have as smart ideas or as much test and challenge as when you use a wider group. So that's on the IQ.
That's great. And a perfect strategy. And I've seen that before where not everyone has an equal voice within these meetings. It can be either someone who generally talks too often, too much, and they just kind of take over the conversation. And I think someone like you want to give everyone a voice at that table. You want them to have skin in the game as well.
Yeah. I'm an analytical person. I think you should lead by fact rather than opinion, as great as opinions are sometimes. Let me tell you about a team I worked with recently where there was 8 members of the team. And the dynamic, it was 7 gentlemen and one woman. And the woman it was very quiet. And the dynamic in the team was that they just ignored her opinion, right? They never actively went to ask her. But when I analyzed the data, I saw that she consistently, pound for pound, had the best ideas on the team. She consistently could forecast the market. And I was like, they are wasting the fact that they don't view her as a useful resource. So I said to the team, the next meetings, we're going to change how we have meetings. From now on, I'm going to give you the topic we're going to discuss before the meeting. You're going to send your views on that topic to me, which also has the added benefit of you have to be more concise. You can't just talk off the top of your head. And then I'm going to compile a report where I take your names off your ideas and you have to read everyone's idea. So they sit and read and they look at the great ideas coming out of this woman. And the first person said, oh, is this John's idea? I said, is it Steve's idea? No. All right. Oh, it's Sarah's idea. Oh, wow. Okay. Right. Because they're assessing the quality of their idea, not all the biases they have about that person. Suddenly opening up new input into your IQ. I put this in the IQ bucket. You are adding to your IQ because you've changed how you work as a team.
Wow. That's amazing. That ability to remove the bias from their decision-making. And then they're now suddenly able to look at that situation objectively, free from that bias. They're now able to look at the idea itself and not who was providing that idea.
Completely.
That's brilliant. So we talked about increasing the IQ, your ability to come up with the best solution. How do we improve our ability to bring others with us?
Okay. Now EQ, this is the bucket I love the most and probably where I do the most work. So we talked about it's the message and it's about communication and it's about taking others through there. So here's the secret. And it doesn't just have to, it's just in life. The more you flex and talk to people how they want to be talked to, the more successful you will be at landing your strategy or in anything in life, right? Too many of us go through life following the golden rule, which we were taught as kids, which is treat others how you want to be treated. It's a great rule. Don't get me wrong, but there is a better rule out there. The platinum rule, treat others how they want to be treated. Okay. Once you can work that out and talk to them how they like to be talked, they will be more open to suggestion. They'll be more open to embracing things. And it's such a simple switch and thing to change. Now, for many people, they've only ever known how to talk in one way. So you might need to have to develop your skills in talking to people in other ways. And what do I mean by this is some people love lots of detail and lots of data. Great if you're talking to someone else who loves lots of detail and lots of data. Not so great if you're talking to someone who loves the big picture. You couldn't give a damn. Right? So you have to talk in big picture, but maybe you've never done that in your life. Right? But you have to do the running, not them. That's the key. And that's what I learned as a school teacher. It's not for me. I can say the same thing over and over, louder and louder, and then go, why are the kids not getting it? Right? It's my job to get them to get it, not their job to learn it necessarily. Many of them will just sit and go, this is boring. But as soon as you change how you talk to them, they'd be like, I get it now. So it's the same with anyone out there.
in order to get buy-ins, you need to craft your message and switch it up a little bit in order that the receiver is now understanding that message a little bit better. Like you said, you have people who are more numbers driven, data and analytical. You have those who are more big picture. And at the end of the day, what is our goal with communication? We are hoping that the receiver understands and hears our message. Why
Mhm.
wouldn't we want to craft and change that message in order to fit that market and that audience? It just makes sense. It goes back into sales, into marketing. And I think, like you said, just in life, how we could become better communicators by
Yeah.
simply changing the way that we approach delivering that message.
Yeah, and something you said there, Chris, was spot on. Too many of us focus on our broadcast. Look, I've just got to get the message out. We don't focus on the receive. Has it the other person received it? Let me check. Let me really double check. And a key part of that is listening and asking questions. Pound for pound, I said earlier, the best skill any one of us can improve in our life is listening. Such great things, but too many of us don't take the time to listen. We just skip past so that we can say something else again.
Yes, absolutely. My entire mind shifted when I was much more receptive and open to hearing others' ideas. So I think it's brilliant what you just said. That's perfect.
And if any more people could do this, like I say, it happen in any aspect of life, be it talking to your kids, talking to your loved ones, trying to convince your friends to go and see a movie you want to see. The more you can flex to what they need, the more likely you are going to be in a happier place.
Yes, absolutely. If you're trying to get everyone to go to that movie, you're going to have four different friends. If one person focused on numbers and data, they want to see, okay, how long is this going to go and how much is it going to cost me? They're looking at it
Yeah.
from a numbers perspective. Some
Yeah.
people want to be sold that story. So it's important to craft that message towards the audience. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
When I was junior as a consultant, I had a boss. This is the reason I focus on this, who made me prepare each conversation for big meetings in 4 different styles. He said, "We don't know what the client is going to need, and I need you to have ready to pull out of your bag, right? I need you to not only have the speech, but have the supporting slides and material. So if it is a big picture person, you can suddenly go into all the detail. And obviously, it would take me 4 times as long to get prepared for meetings. And I was like, oh my God. But because of that training, I can now do it instantly because I've been trained that way. And that's what I mean about many of us only know one style. And we actually, it's like going to the gym. There's some muscles we've never used. And the first time we use them, it's going to feel tough and it's going to be hard. But we do that training for the day that we're going to need those muscles, right? Because then they're already primed. So there are ways to improve your EQ in this area by putting in a lot of practice. And that's why using things like the movie discussion as a test case is a nice, safe environment to practice a new style ready for when you're in the heated boardroom.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely want to improve our communication skills. There's just so much at stake. And just think of how much our lives and our careers and our businesses could improve if we could become better communicators. So that way that audience can actually hear and receive our message.
I mean, the world would be completely different. Yeah. I mean, I look forward to that world, but in the meantime, I've got a job. So it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Keeps you employed. Now, I know for myself, and I'm sure a lot of other business owners, once we're improving ourselves and we have this great idea and we're looking to execute, we've got the buy-in, but we lose focus. We
Yeah.
lose that ability to focus and be efficient in actually executing that great idea. What are
Yeah.
some tips and tricks? What can we do to better focus?
Well, we've already covered one, Chris. The big one is play Pokemon with your own activities, right? Get rid of at least half of them.
Mhm.
Okay. Whatever you're doing, get rid of stuff. And human beings, we hate getting rid of stuff. We hate closing down options. We hate removing stuff. There's loads of great scientific research when they give people a diagram where they say, like Lego blocks, and they say, make this symmetrical, right? What do people do? They add more blocks to make it symmetrical rather than remove the one block that would also make it symmetrical. The human brain always thinks to add first rather than remove. God bless us, we're great. But yeah, remove stuff from your life. You'll have more focus. That's the number one thing. Number two is what I talk about is anticipate where things will go wrong. Okay. Look at the barriers that might come up in your way, right? Don't deal with them ahead of time. Plan for them ahead if scheduled. So I do a lot of pre-mortems with companies and with individuals. Now, you may have heard of a pre-mortem. Those who haven't heard of it, it is where you imagine whatever you're trying to do fails miserably. And you look for every reason that it might have failed, pick the 5 you're most worried about, and take the action so that never happens. So it could be, let's go back to the movie discussion, right? Nice, simple. Let's say we've decided on a movie. What might stop us from going to the movie? Okay, my car might break down. I might run out of money. My 4 friends might fall out over something, right? So I'm going to make sure the car has had a service. I'm going to make sure that I've taken $50 out of the cinema so that when I press go, it just flows smoothly. It is all focused, right? So that's what focus, and that happens in companies all the time. They launch a big strategy. They say, look, this is all the thing. Then they forget that actually people don't have licenses for the new software. So that's a barrier in the way. And they lose time, right? Or they lose months before they realize it. So to anticipate the barriers to your focus and remove them before they even come up, rather than trying to deal with them at the time, is a really good thing for your focus.
Wow, that's brilliant. Because I know in any planning or strategy session, there usually are those weaknesses and the barriers, the obstacles that you're anticipating running into, and it can create a lot of stress and anxiety when trying to move that idea forward. And I love that strategy that you presented, where list the top 5, make sure that you find workarounds, something that can keep that moving forward, and then that stress and anxiety is just diminished. Now you can focus on that success, and you already have a strategy in case things go awry and aren't working right. You have something to propel you moving forward.
Yeah. I talk about the power of pre-decisions, right? The more you can pre-decide rather than decide in the moment, the better you'll be. And do you know what? Everything I just talked about was at a company level, but this applies to just individuals day to day, right? Think about what are our biggest focus barriers. We're probably unaware of them, right? Of course, it's the mobile phone, right? Your phone, ding, ding, ding. That's the number one, right? How do you eliminate that? Put it in a box, turn it off, silent. But there are other things like hunger. Think how much you're affected by how hungry you are. The build up to lunchtime, you spend the whole hour before thinking, what am I going to have for lunch? When am I going to have for lunch? Right? And imagine you've got to write the most important report of your life, right? And in that hour build up, half your mind is elsewhere, right? I talk about focus points. Imagine you had 100 focus points, 50 of them already gone to lunch. So how do you make sure that you're not distracted? Have lunch earlier, or make sure you have a snack prepared. And the same goes with the temperature of the room, or, if you're sat next to someone you don't like, your mind goes to like, all these things are focused barriers, focused distractors. Eliminate them as much as possible. And that's why when I do stuff, super important meetings, I think about the temperature of the room. Is there catering? Who's sitting next to who? What order we talk about things? Will it irritate people? Because those could be focus barriers. And I want everything to run smoothly and that we focus on the strategy, not these little things, or even lose 10% of our focus because of these.
The distractions are never ending and they're always constant. And of course, throughout our work days, we are constantly bombarded with just, hey, I want your attention. Give me your attention.
Yeah.
So in order to be better, we need to remove those distractions ahead of time. Anything that could potentially make our mindset go off that main topic, just overcome that without thinking about it twice. Now it's, okay, this is how I fix that. Let's move forward.
Yeah. It's amazing sometimes the things that will help us in that respect.
Yes.
It's funny. I'm just moving my home office from one room in my house to another room in my house. And the room I'm moving it to is opposite. Actually, the building next door to me is a university. And I can actually see, as of this week, the students have come back and they're studying. And one of the reasons I'm moving is I know that watching 50 students at a time studying while I'm trying to work will encourage me to work harder, right? It's that power. And it's something I do with teams often is Zoom libraries, because people find it hard sometimes to work alone, particularly in this world where we're all sat at home. But just opening up a Zoom where all their work colleagues are working at the same time, not talking, will encourage them to work most of the time. Right? Will encourage them to be more focused and disciplined, because it's the power of social proof, the power of others are doing it, so I'm going to do it too. And now I do this with teams, and I'd say 8 out of 10 teams keep it going, where they'll say, look, do you know what? 2 hours a week, we're all going to work on Zoom at the same time. And they all tell me about the power of the productivity that comes out of the side of it. So I'm looking forward to my office and using the inspiration of the 50 students each day to make me more effective.
I'm very excited for you. You've already accomplished so much already, but for you to realize, hey, the space that I'm working in is not very productive for myself, you're going to make those changes. I think that's fantastic. The community, the social proof is so important. I find myself being a lot more productive when I surround myself with other people who are actually being productive. And it's just that accountability. You're able to have conversations. And again, it's kind of that you almost feel a little guilty if you see others working and you're not pulling your own
Yeah.
weight.
Yeah, completely right. And the key component of this, which flows through the three pillars, is self-awareness, right? Invest time in understanding yourself and your own drivers. So I long ago realized the accountability one, Chris, which sounds like it's similar to you. So I have a little technique anytime I have a task that I don't really want to do, which is I either text or phone one of my sisters. And I say to her, look, I got to do this. And she'll say to me, I don't care. I literally don't care. But the simple fact of me having told her, she never has to check up on it, means I am infinitely more likely to do that activity because I've told another human being. So she gets irritated that I use her as this human being, but she's my sister, so I can do that. But just working that out about myself was revolutionary, right? It really was a game changer for how I went about difficult tasks. So work out yourself, whatever it takes, and start implementing those things.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, when it comes to the formula for success that you patented and created here, what is the biggest one that is the challenge? What do people struggle with the most?
I'd love to be able to survey the whole world, but from my experience working with companies, it is definitely, I'd say the EQ is the part that they closely followed by the SQ. So lots of companies that I work with have loads of great ideas, but can they transmit them and can they then focus on them is where they seem to be lacking and where we tend to help most.
Wow. I think just to realize our own shortcomings a bit and to see what other companies struggle with can help us
Mm.
prevent it from becoming an issue in the future. And I think it's so important. When it comes to that equation, what are people really good at? I saw that you said that everyone has no shortage of ideas. Are they generally good ideas or are they kind of lacking?
I mean, they are generally good ideas, right? Even if you don't look externally, people surprisingly come up with great ideas. I think human beings are constantly looking at things like how can we improve?
Mhm.
Uh, Largely out of boredom, if nothing else, right? Like, oh, can I optimize this? And boredom bias, that's a fascinating thing we can talk about and how that affects strategy. But they're not very good transmitting those ideas and getting other people as excited about them as they are. So, sure, we can all do with a bit of improvement in our ideas, but it's that transferring. And I'm thinking about a client that I'm working with recently. It's immensely sad that the ability to transmit ideas isn't better because the healthcare system. So I'm working with a team whose job is to research the best trends in healthcare around the world. So take a field of medicine. They say, okay, what is the best thing happening in cancer right now? So they look around globally and they compile all that information. And then they go and present to the doctors and the clinicians and say, these are the best practices. This is what you should be doing. Okay. Sounds like a really simple and powerful thing, Chris. Like we've crowdsourced, and this is all based on fact, by the way. It's not just opinion. It's not like, oh, there's a doctor over here who uses this ancient herbal thing. No, it's scientifically, they've looked at the stats. So you'd think that's a great transfer of knowledge. Somebody's going out and doing that research. But what happens during that meeting where they hand over the knowledge? Can you imagine? Can you guess what happens?
Does it get lost in translation?
That's the polite way, right? What actually happens is the medical professionals say, hey, what do you know? You're not medical professionals. I spent 8, 10 years training as a doctor. I know best.
Oh,
And these guys, because they are just researchers, they say, no. We've gone and interviewed people but there's this resistance that me take on a new idea. It's again, that arrogance, that humility. So I'm working with that team on how they can sell those ideas better, not come up with better ideas, but how can they have that conversation in a better way so that the doctors and the clinicians say, actually, let's give that a go. That's really good. Yeah. How can you do that wonky strategy so they feel they own it? And that generally is a lot of the places that we're called in to help rather than the coming up with the new ideas.
yeah, I can definitely see that as a shortcoming for a lot of businesses. One of the books that I read recently was The 12-Week Year. I can't remember who wrote it, but if you're familiar, basically it was these two gentlemen who run this consulting firm. And one of the biggest challenges that they noticed in companies was getting the employee buy-in. And I think that's the EQ that you mentioned here, something that they were consulting with this company and they had tried for 2 to 3 months already to get the buy-in from their employees, or they were considering how do we approach this situation? And literally they said, okay, this is a roadblock for us right now. We need to get buy-in right now. So they held a team meeting instantly. They shared the idea, why it was going to benefit them, and they got the buy-in from the employees. So something that they were waiting on for 2 months, those consultants came in and were able to get over that obstacle right away. And I imagine very similar for you too, where you're taking a look, this big picture look at what they're trying to accomplish. And then you remove those roadblocks and obstacles in order to get the team buy-in, find the best ideas, and then actually focus on what's important in driving those forward.
Yeah, 100%. And I wish we were brought in earlier, but like I said, there's a lack of self-awareness. Think of a client where they'd already invested tens of millions of dollars trying IT solutions to what really was just similar to that situation. You just needed to fix the human conversation element to unlock the problem. But hey, I'd rather be the last solution than not a solution ever. So, we'll take the wins.
Absolutely. Better late than never. Makes
Mhm.
sense. So you talked about boredom and how that can either help or hurt our efficiencies or ideas and execution.
Yeah. So a little bit of boredom is great because we think about how can we improve things. But seriously, I worked with some great companies. They're doing fantastically. And you can just see they suddenly want to do something new. Yeah. They want something new and shiny. And you're like, why? When everything is ticking along nicely. But it's that boredom bias. Right? They feel they need to be, and this is at the individual level, they need to be earning their money or they need to be showing the world that they're doing something, taking action. Where actually sometimes the best strategy is let's do nothing. Let's stay as we are. So one of the things I always throw into strategy discussions is the option of status quo. Because that's
Yeah.
often in brainstorming sessions where it's like, what should we do? A, B, C, D. I'm like, don't forget about Z, a Z.
Yes, absolutely. I saw a post that was really inspiring. It was about how at the end of the day, when you're tasked with making a decision on something, and even if you don't make a decision, that is its own decision on itself. You decided that not taking action on that was actually the best strategy to move forward. And that can be a challenge for us, especially when we're getting bored, whether at individual or the company level. How do we cure that boredom as we're trying to find something new and shiny? How do we stick with the status quo when we're feeling bored?
Well, that's a great question, right? So getting more excited by the things you are doing. Sometimes it helps senior executives get reacquainted with their own business. So one of the things about when you're senior, you lose touch with that shop floor. And, I think one of the most powerful things is go and walk the floor, go and, go and do a day in the life. Get the excitement back, the buzz of what you're actually doing because you might not. And then the other side of it is acknowledge doing nothing as an action, right? Imagine if your to-do list, so we'll write a to-do list that is the things we're going to do. What if we included on that list the things we're not going to do out of choice? That's an action as well. I've made a choice not to read this article today. I've made this choice not to kick off this new project. I've made it, right? And then you can tick it off, right? Because a lot of people have to do this to get that endorphin rush or the ticking off. So if you actually turn inactive or doing nothing into a visible action, you can get some of that rush of I've done something. And
Yes.
I can look back historically at all the decisions I've made that were
Wow.
not doing anything.
That's brilliant to actually put those no action items within your to-do list. Because then that lets you know I'm still moving things forward. I've just made this conscious decision not to take action on this because, like you said, prioritizing, you're taking a look at everything that needs to be done. And generally, there's going to be the one or two things that are going to move the needle the furthest along. So that can help you take those good ideas, but they're just not a priority right now. We need something that's going to have the most impact. And I think that's what businesses and individuals are looking to do at the end of the day to have the most impact.
Yeah. And I always love in the strategy process, this is where the IQ part comes in. Give me more ideas, give me more options. A great IQ session is we come up with 100 options because I'd rather pick 10 and that we're all bought into them. And the great thing is, if those 10 turn out to be duffs, we've got 90 backups. We don't have to go through this process again. We've already got a long list. So we come up with 100, we make a choice on 10, but we also make 90 decisions of no, which are also actions, right? And those no's are a backup for later if ever we need them.
Wow, that's brilliant. I love that. Now, Ferris, with all the advice and tips that you've shared with us, is there anything that we haven't touched on, like any advice you'd want to share with other companies or business owners or individuals?
Well, I do, but I'm also a big fan of brevity. So, leave enough hooks for people to come back. I think there's a lot of great stuff out there. We talked about listening, but a lot of great stuff about you already know a lot of the lessons that you need to know. Just start using the knowledge that you've already got rather than acquiring new stuff. It's probably you'll be more effective. But hey, look, I can talk about effectiveness. I can talk about the 3 pillars all evening, all morning. So I'd love to carry on the conversation with anybody listening to this. And that's probably the best thing to say now.
Absolutely. That's perfect. Where can people find more about you and what you offer and connect with you?
Yeah, well, they can check out the company website. So it's shiageto.com, which I'm sure Chris will put in the in the notes. Yeah, I used to spell it on there, but I thought, yeah, there's more affection. Otherwise, the other great place to catch me is on LinkedIn. I spend a disproportionate amount of time. So look for Faris Aranki. There's only one of us on LinkedIn, and we'll happily pick up the conversation there. And every day I post tips and share my journey because I just want to help people as much as possible.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And I think something very, very important that you touched on was there's a time for learning and there's a time for taking action. You've learned all that you need to learn after listening to this podcast, reading the books, watching YouTube videos. It's time for business owners to take action. So one of those tips and actions they can take is reaching out to Faris to find out more information and see how he can help you. For all the listeners who want to learn more, make sure you check out the links in the description and the notes below. Faris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much, Chris. Same to you, my friend.